To have done something. Part 2. Presentation. In our previous videos, we studied the phrase to have done something and how to express that in Spanish. In this video, we're going to go a little bit deeper into this, and we're going to see the different uses of this phrase in English and then in Spanish. In English, we use the phrase to have done something to talk about an action that started in the past and continues at present. For example, we have been friends for over 20 years. So we see that this started 20 years ago, but still is true at present. She has worked here since 1999. This implies that she started working here in 1999 and she's still with us. I've been saving money to go to college. This means that I already started to do that, I started this in the past, and I'm still doing it. So clearly, in these examples, we can see that we are using this structure to talk about something that started in the past and still continues at present. But another use of this in English is to refer to an action that is finished, but somehow is important at present. For example, he has just left. We have finished studying for the test. And the question is, how do native Spanish speakers express this in real life? As I told you before in the previous video, the phrase that we studied before, he estado, has estado, is a very handy phrase in that by knowing that we can quickly express this without having to worry much about if this refers to the present or to the past. However, native Spanish speakers rarely use that form, and instead they use what we'll see next. If the action started in the past and continues at present, they use the present. For example, we have been friends for 20 years. Somos amigos desde hace 20 años. So in our previous video we saw that we could have said hemos sido amigos, and you will find that every once in a while. However, in 90 or 95% of the cases, you will hear people saying this. Literally, we say something along the lines of we are friends for 20 years. Another way of expressing this is by using the phrase hace 20 años que somos amigos. Notice that in Spanish we use the present. We tend to use the present for this. He has been studying for 2 hours. Remember, in Spanish we would say something along the lines of he studies or he is studying for 2 hours. To say that in Spanish we would say está estudiando desde hace 2 horas. Or estudia, of course. Or hace 2 horas que está estudiando. Again, to express the duration, notice how for 2 hours we use desde hace or just hace. And in this construction, we see that we begin with hace, the duration, hace 2 horas que, and then the verb in the present, está estudiando. I've been working here since 1999. Trabajo aquí desde 1999. Literally, I work here since 1999. Note the use of the present, one more time. They've been married since 2005. Remember, in Spanish, we would word this as they are married since 2005. Están casados desde el 2005. Again, you see that we use the present for this. To convey this idea for an amount of time or since, it's essential that you use these phrases accurately. Desde hace, or desde. When we are referring to the present, like in this case, for plus duration, for 20 years, for 2 hours, is expressed as desde hace plus the duration, desde hace 20 años, desde hace 2 horas, or hace plus the duration plus the word que, and then the rest of the sentence. For example, hace 20 años, this is the duration, que somos amigos. Something along the lines of it's been 20 years since we are friends. That would be a way in which we would word it. Hace 2 horas que está estudiando. It's been 2 hours since he is studying. Although it may sound strange in English to word it like this, that's the way we say it in Spanish, so it's important that you start to get used to this. This is a very common expression in the Spanish language. Now, when we talk about since plus a date, In Spanish, we use desde. Desde plus the date. For example, since 1999, desde 1999. Since 2005, desde el 2005. In general, after the year 2000, we tend to put el, which we don't do in years before the year 2000. And now it's your turn to do some quick practice. You have been cooking for a long time. Remember, in Spanish you would say something like, you are cooking for a long time. Estás cocinando desde hace mucho tiempo, or hace mucho tiempo que estás cocinando. We could also use cocinas desde hace mucho tiempo que cocinas. But if you use the progressive form in English, chances are that in Spanish you would probably go with this, cocinando. Another example. He has been sleeping for 10 hours. Remember, in Spanish you would say something along the lines of he is sleeping for 10 hours. Está durmiendo desde hace 10 horas. Or, hace 10 horas que está durmiendo. I have been the manager since 2010. Remember, in Spanish we would say I am the manager since 2010. Soy el encargado desde el 2010. She has lived here since she was 9. Vive aquí desde que tenía 9 años. So it's very important to remember that in the present, when we have for plus duration, we will translate that as desde hace plus the duration, desde hace mucho tiempo, desde hace 10 horas, or an alternative way of expressing the same is by starting the sentence with hace, the duration, and que. Hace mucho tiempo que, hace 10 horas que. When we want to express since plus a date, we use desde plus the date. Desde el 2010, desde que tenía 9 años. So as we have just seen, when we are referring to situations that started in the past but continue at present, in Spanish we use the present tense. Now, if the action is finished, instead we use the preterite. For example, we have walked for 2 hours and now we are at home, for instance. In Spanish we would say something like we walked for 2 hours. Caminamos durante 2 horas. She has cried for a couple of hours. Lloró por un par de horas. The kids have just left. Los chicos recién salieron. They have received your email. Recibieron tu email. So we can see that in all of these cases, as we are talking about a finished action, we use the preterite in Spanish. Caminamos, lloró, salieron, and recibieron. And something important here is that when we are talking about the past, the translation of the word for is a little bit different. For plus duration, like for 2 hours, in the past is translated as durante plus the duration, durante 2 horas. We could also say por plus the duration, por 2 horas, as we have here. Lloró por un par de horas, for a couple of hours. We could have said durante un par de horas. So, when we are talking about the duration, for plus duration, we could use durante or por plus the duration. Now it's your turn to do some quick practice. Have you read my email? ¿Leíste mi email? He has slept for more than 10 hours. Durmió por más de 10 horas. I have seen that movie before. Vi esa película antes. She has prayed for an hour. Rezó durante una hora. Or I could have said por una hora. Remember these key phrases. In the past, for plus duration is translated as durante or por plus the duration.